Hello, my name is Misha. I'm a DevOps engineer from the Netherlands, and on this channel, I teach you everything you need to know about DevOps and help you to land your first position or to teach you more about DevOps if you are a software engineer and learning more about DevOps. And in this video, I would like to speak about cloud providers. Cloud providers are important in your career as a DevOps engineer, and especially if you are junior or looking to change your career, then focusing on cloud is a very good bet because that is a quite a very specialized skill set to have, and it can increase your probability of landing your first position as a DevOps or junior DevOps engineer. And technically, you would then perhaps be a cloud infrastructure engineer, and there's a lot of discussion around the terms, which I'll be addressing in one of my future videos. For now, we are going to talk about cloud providers. I will speak to you about how I chose mine and show you the process how you can determine which one to choose. So why is this important? Well, traditionally everything was running on-prem, of course. Companies would have their own servers and everything would run on there, and then you had the system administrator who would run those servers, manage the hardware, and deploy applications on there. Then everything started moving to the cloud, and these companies would start to make a lot of money. And now you actually see some movements going back to on-prem again, which is interesting. But the majority still is either moving towards the cloud or running into the cloud. And the benefit of that is that you don't have the overhead of managing the hardware. It is much easier to scale. So if you have a small application and you want to, and then your user base increases, you don't have to buy a ton of new hardware. You just purchase more virtual machines in the cloud, or you just increase the node count on your Kubernetes cluster. And another thing that is very interesting or very useful about cloud is that it provides a layer of abstraction. So if you use something like Azure Kubernetes service, it's much easier to spin up a Kubernetes cluster using one of these managed services instead of deploying it yourself. And then the AKS team will take care of the security updates, etc. So they will keep track of the upstream Kubernetes project. They will implement their own security patches, and then you just update that, and then you don't have to worry about that stuff yourself. And that's just one example. Another one is, for example, networking becomes a lot easier and simplified in the cloud because you can just use the managed services that they provide. So that also allows a field of specialization. So if you are a junior engineer, or if you're looking to change your career, then honing in on the cloud aspect is a bit of a hack because, okay, so it has been around for 5 years now, much longer than that, but I would say the last 7 years is when things really got going and moving towards the cloud. So there are a lot of people with these skill sets, but there is still quite a lack of people with the skill set of actually provisioning cloud infrastructure and knowing that well. Very often it's just a software engineer who is doing it on the side, or there is an old school sysadmin who is not really interested in learning it, or is he maybe even resistant to it. So there is a opportunity there to specialize and to find a job as a cloud infrastructure engineer. Now, in the Netherlands, we often call a DevOps engineer. In America, the term is a bit more strict, but I would say cloud engineer is a good route to go as well, and an opportunity to land your first position if you are junior. So to become a cloud engineer / DevOps engineer, I always advise in specializing in one cloud. Choose one. Why do I say that? Well, when I started out 4 years ago, I changed my career to DevOps in about 6 months. And during that time, I had this notion that if I know several cloud providers, then I have a much broader skill set, and therefore I increase my chances of getting a job. But when you do this, then you are spreading yourself too thin. So if you have a piece of bread like this, and then you take a knife, and then you put butter on there, then you're becoming too little butter spread over too much bread if you do multiple cloud providers. Instead, it's better to just have a big chunk of butter and just have a nice thick layer of butter on your sandwich, because you know one cloud provider well. That's the metaphor that I would use. So I would say choose one provider and then go deep on that one. Learn everything there is to learn, and get certifications, get certified. And the thing is, these cloud providers are all doing the same thing. So if you know one well, then eventually, after a few years, you'll find that these skills transfer very easily to the next one if you choose to work with another cloud provider. It becomes much easier to learn, to pick up the new skills. It's basically just a change of vocabulary. It's just the same concepts with different names. However, it's much easier, like mentally, to just stick to one, to pick one cloud provider like AWS or Azure, and to stick to that one, learn the vocabulary well, learn the ecosystem, learn how the UI works, how the CLI works, how they build up their API, and that will truly, for me, it helped a lot to just have that focus, because I was trying to keep up with the news on AWS and Azure at the same time. That's a lot to keep up with. It's a lot to wrap your mind around. And I think if a candidate comes to me and he has like several certifications in several cloud providers, then to me that's an indication that he is not very focused, that he is just spread too thin. And I would challenge him on that. So I would say, especially in the beginning, choose one and stick to that one. Now, how do you know which one to choose? Well, in my case, it was a bit different. So I changed my career, and then I landed my first position as a traineeship. So I was being paid like half a normal salary, and I was being trained on the job. And initially, it was more like a Linux system administrator position that I had. And then this place where I was working, the municipality of Amsterdam, was going to move to Azure. So they were going to move to Azure. So for me, that choice was basically made for me. I was in that environment. They were moving to Azure. So that's how I rolled into Azure. So that is the first one, Microsoft Azure. Next, we have AWS. And finally, there is GCP, the Google Cloud. These are the main players in the cloud industry. There's also Alibaba Cloud and Oracle. But as far in my experience so far, I have not seen any job openings in those providers, right? So it's these are the main players to focus on and to make a choice from. Now, I can only speak to the Dutch market, but in the next section, I'm going to show you how to perform this research yourself. But in short, in the Dutch market, GCP is very, very low, is not, how do you say, it's not popular. Very few jobs on GCP. It has a very low market share. So in the Dutch market, GCP would not be the one to focus on. However, from what I've seen, GCP is a well-built system, and their documentation is fantastic. So I would like to work with GCP, but I choose where the money is, basically. Next, you have AWS, Amazon Web Services. Well, it speaks to itself. It's the Amazon cloud, very popular, very big market share. And then there's Microsoft Azure. So in the Dutch market, there's an interesting situation because AWS used to have a pretty big share in the beginning, but that seems to be moving, and I'll explain to you why. So Azure is by Microsoft, and in the Dutch market, in the Dutch business market, Microsoft is highly represented. So most companies in the Netherlands, they have Microsoft Office or 365, I should say. They have contracts with Microsoft to license all of the business software. So the Microsoft ecosystem is very much ingrained in Dutch business, in Dutch companies. It's very prevalent here. So when a few years ago, when then Microsoft and Azure started rolling, they would reach out to these businesses and they would say, okay, are you interested in moving to the cloud? And the business would say, yeah, sure. Then Microsoft says, all right, if you choose us instead of AWS, we're going to give you 100,000 euros of credit. I'm just saying a number here, but that's how it would work. They would get a ton of credit, free credit. And when you use that free credit to build up your initial landing zone, you build up your initial system, then when you have something going there, then you are much more likely to stick. So that's the tactic that Microsoft uses, that they already have their businesses in their Office licenses and Active Directory and things like that. They give them credit for Azure, and then they basically lock them in. So I'm not going to speak to the validity of this strategy or anything like that. I mean, that's for you to decide. I think it's a very clever strategy. But that's why here in the Netherlands, Azure is very prevalent, because it's a heavy Microsoft-focused market. Secondly, there is this thing called data regulations. And what Microsoft did, so if you have the Netherlands like this, it's roughly shaped like this. If you see it on the map, this is the Netherlands, like that. You have to see here. The Netherlands has a few, at least one, but I think there are several now, data centers by Microsoft. So Microsoft has several data centers in the Netherlands. So governments and some businesses have requirements that their data should not leave the country. Their data needs to stay in the Netherlands, in the country, or maybe in Europe. But if you have a data center in the Netherlands, then basically you are default option for many of these companies and government organizations. So especially government is very keen on Azure because of this. So they have the local data centers, they have the contracts with the business, and they have a big advantage for governments because of these factors. And like I said, I basically rolled into Azure, but when I researched this for myself, then these reasons made it a very solid choice for me. So by specializing on Azure, I know that I'm going to have a job for the very foreseeable future, right? Because governments are just now starting to move towards Azure or they are in the process of that. So it's moving there, but then it's also maintaining that and revising that. So there's going to be a ton of work left there in the foreseeable future. And they're all on Azure. So for me, Azure was a solid choice. That doesn't, it's not to say that AWS doesn't have any validity here in the Netherlands, but when I made this research for myself, I spoke to an architect friend of mine, and he said to me, developers want AWS, managers want Azure. And that was a phrase that really stuck to me because AWS has this more like open source kind of Silicon Valley sort of association with them, even though Microsoft is doing great things with open source recently. But the cool guys want to do AWS, not Azure, right? That's basically the sentiment that I get in the market. But if you think about it, I think it's the safer bet to side with the people who are actually in charge of these decisions and who are in charge of the money. So for the Dutch market, this was the logical choice. That is not to say that this is the choice for you. And I also want to say, I'm not saying this because I'm a Microsoft MVP. I became an MVP because I was working in Azure and making content about that. But I have no affiliation with Microsoft. I'm not selling Azure. I'm just saying this is the process that I did for making my own choice. So you'll have to figure out basically which provider will give you the highest chances of finding a job. And now I will show you how I would approach that question. So what I do is like I have a pretty good LinkedIn presence. I have about a few thousand followers and I'm pretty active there. So I use LinkedIn a lot. And as you see, I get messages every day. I get tons of connection requests, a lot of recruiters. And if you build your presence, this is a very good, this is an excellent resource to utilize because I never have to search for a job anymore. People come to me. And I created a full course on how to build your online presence. And this course is actually available in my school community. And my school community is all about helping people to find jobs as a DevOps engineer. So whether you are a junior who is trying to get into the DevOps, into a DevOps role, or maybe you are a senior software developer, or you are a sysadmin and you want to learn more about DevOps, this is the place to be. We have a very thriving community with new posts being posted every day. And I have a classroom full of content where you have courses on building up a good note-taking system to learn more efficiently. I have complete roadmaps for Kubernetes certification. I have an 8-hour course on learning the Kubernetes fundamentals. I have a 10-hour course on Linux. There's a ton of stuff here, but there's also a 3-hour course on personal branding. And here I explain the entire process that I utilize in building up my LinkedIn profile, my YouTube channel, my X profile to build an online presence, which is an extremely useful thing if you are a junior engineer or if you're looking to change your career. This is the hack to do. Build your online presence. And you can learn all about it here in my community. There's tons of posts here. You can ask for help when you get stuck or if you're unsure what the next step is. Check it out. I highly suggest this for anyone who is looking to change their career. Now, I would, to do the research, I would go on LinkedIn and I would search for jobs. So here, let's start by searching for Azure here in the top bar, search bar on the top left here. I type in Azure and then I go to jobs, and then here I see 5,000 results of Azure in the Netherlands. Well, I'm going to scope that down a little bit because I'm not interested in working in the entirety of the Netherlands. So I'm going to scope it down to Amsterdam, The Hague, Amersfoort, Hoofddorp, Utrecht, and Amstelveen, Schiphol. These are the areas that I'm interested in working with or commuting to. And you can filter it down even more, but this is how I would do it. So this is the area I'm interested in working in, and I'm searching for Azure. So now I have 1,651 results. And these are Cloud Ops Lead, Cloud Developer, Azure Platform Engineer, Azure Engineer, Cloud Infrastructure Specialist at Microsoft. That's interesting. DevOps Engineer Cloud Systems, Azure Consultant. So it's not like PO, product owner roles that require Azure. This is all like, or most of what I see here are actually cloud engineering roles or DevOps engineering roles, right? It's not these peripheral roles. It's all just cloud specialist, cloud engineer. Now, if I change this to, for example, GCP, let's see how much we find then. Okay, so here I find 408 results for GCP, Cloud Engineer, but here I see a few more nuanced roles like Data Engineer, Clinical Trial Associate, Software Engineer. So there seems to be, yes, there are roles, but there are also a bit more nuanced roles, not clear DevOps or cloud engineering roles. Now, if I would search for AWS, I get 77 results. And yes, these are all cloud engineers, and there are plenty of jobs to apply for. But this, to me, is a rather clear indication that if you are interested in landing a job, you have a much higher chance to land that job if you go for Azure. And again, this is very dependent on where you are in the world. But here I have 1,651 results, and with AWS, I have 77 results. That is a lot less. That's like, so it's very clear to me that Azure is the right choice in this current market. So this is how I do the research. I go on LinkedIn and I search for the jobs there, but there are also different places you can do. You can also do Indeed or Glassdoor. Like there are so many more places, but the process is the same. Filter on location and then search for the cloud providers and see what you can find. Like this is not an exhaustive method, but it's a good method to get an indication of what the market is like. Next, I would also attend a few meetups. So go to meetup.com and check out the providers. Maybe there's an Azure meetup, there's an AWS meetup, and just see how the popularity is and how many people show up there. And finally, what's most important is what is the one that you like to work with. So I really enjoy working with Microsoft Azure. As soon as you are used to the ecosystem and you are used to working with it. I mean, am I even logged in here? I'm not sure. I might not be. Oh, yes, I am. So when you get used to the UI of Azure and when you get used to navigating around, it's actually a really good. I think it's a very well built system. It's rather intuitive, and it's better than AWS in terms of UI. And of course, you use the UI, but the real work happens with the Azure CLI, Bicep, infrastructure as code, etc. And that also works really well, in my opinion. I think the Azure API is very well built, and it is very intuitive, easy to learn, And the best thing about Azure is that they have Microsoft Learn. So if you Google the AZ-104, for example, they have excellent learning paths. They have the certifications, prepare for the exam. All of the learning paths are available for free, and the exams are pretty good, and it provides a really nice path to certify into a cloud provider. So I really like Azure. AWS has exactly the same stuff like this, but this is what I know, so that's what I'm showing you here. And in the next video, I'm going to be diving a bit more in how to learn a cloud provider. This one is more about how to choose, but I would suggest that you also take this into account. Like, what are the learning materials that are available to you? And do you like it? Do you like what you see? Like, I like these little icons and the how they have shaped things. I really like structure in things. I like to have a clear path, and I like checking things off. That's just how I am. And maybe you don't like it and you like the AWS path better. I mean, base your choice on that. So, in summary, choose one provider. So let's summarize this here. Okay, so summarize. Choose one provider and learn that well. Choose one provider and learn that well. And specialize and go deep. In order to choose the one provider, do the market research on LinkedIn, Indeed, and meetups. And also, maybe instead of thinking of jobs, think about companies. Like, make a list of companies that you would like to work for. Take a look at the sectors. Are you interested in working with the energy sector, like renewable energy or transport, things like that? Well, take that into account and then make a list of companies and try to figure out which cloud providers they use and make your choice based on that. I want to impress upon you, make your choice based on data, where the money is, instead of the feeling and what people on Reddit tell you. So choose one provider, specialize, go deep, do the market research on LinkedIn and Indeed meetups, and then view the training material that's available. And in short, for Azure, all of the material is for free here. And then if you then add John Saville here to the mix, John Saville, that's basically all you need to learn Azure. So you have this YouTube channel. He's a fantastic YouTuber. John Saville plus Microsoft Learn is all you need to know. You can learn. You can basically become an Azure professional fully for free. So those are the steps that I would take to choose a cloud provider. Choose one well. And remember, if you want to learn more about cloud, if you're confused with all the options, or if you just want to have a community of people that can help you study and help you accountable, a place to ask questions, or if you want to ask me questions directly in the group coaching calls that I host 3 times a week, check out my DevOps community. I think you'll like it. Thank you for watching and see you in the next video.